Soundari, who is joining us for not the first time this year. She's a veteran of this conference, and I'm so glad that she's with us today. Soundari, please join me on air and tell us more about less is more and how to use stories to shed light and overcome organizational angst. Welcome.
Hi, Arpan. Hi. Good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I
My
can't
pleasure.
see you, but I hope you can see me.
Yes, yes. Dear friends, please put some fire in the lower right corner if you can see and hear Soundari, so we can check connection.
Yeah,
Do you see the
great,
fires?
great. Yes, great.
Awesome,
No, I was
awesome.
wondering, I couldn't see your video, so I was wondering whether
Oh,
you're, whether that's why I was checking mine. Yeah, thank
okay.
you. Thank you so much. This is, I think I just missed the first year of the story conference. Otherwise, I do feel like a veteran, not any because of the gray hair or anything, but by just being here in this platform and meeting and seeing everybody and learning from the entire collective that is there. It was
Before
it was Mother's
it's
Day.
it's it's so such a pleasure to see you here. Just before we begin, I'm going to hop off and I'm going to remind our dear audience, dear friends, in the lower left corner, you can choose your language and not to listen to speaker and translator at the same time. Please do that. If you're on the phone, it's in the upper right corner. You tap the screen and you choose the language. Okay, Soundari,
Yeah.
it's so great to see you here. I will be off. Call me if you need me. I'm here listening to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just might request you if there's something on the chat that that I'm not getting or I'm missing out. Please call me out. I'll try to keep an eye on it. Sometimes the translation works, doesn't work. So just help me with it if there's something, if there's a fire there.
No worries, we'll do.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So really good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. It was Mother's Day in some parts of the world, the Sunday. I'm based out of Hong Kong, and Mother's Day is celebrated because, we've all gone global and all that. So Mother's Day is pretty much celebrated here. My own children are studying abroad. Also on that Sunday, I was just sitting and relaxing and reading a book and, catching up on the weekly reading, sitting on the sofa, stretching my legs, and I heard my doorbell ring. I opened the door and it's my neighbor's children who are there. And they brought this beautiful bouquet for me to wish me for Mother's Day. And they came in along with their mother and aunt. So while, today we have the distances, we have differences and all that, I think really sharing anecdotes and building that connection across the barriers. So stories conferences topic of last year about building bridges, and to this time's thing on shedding light really connects to me. I think it's all about building those connections, and Artem does a great job of building those connections for all of us here. So thank you again, Artem. I want to start with a little game, and I need you to participate in the game. All you need to do is to add something on the chat. So please keep the chat busy. I'll try to keep an eye on it. Just keep the chat coming. So, have all of you heard of Lego blocks? Maybe you can type yes or no on the chat. Some of us might have played with it when we were kids and all that. So yeah, I was on yeah, everybody has. Who hasn't heard, right? Yeah. So let's say you're building a Lego block bridge. Okay. So this is the bridge I was trying to build. So can you help me? As you can see, this bridge is uneven. What do you think I should do to make the bridge stable? So if you can type that answer on the chat. So I'm building a Lego bridge. It is clearly uneven. If I let it go, it's going to fall down. What can I do to make this bridge stable? So if you can type your answer on the chat. Put some bricks on the left. Yes, Satyam. Add 3 more blocks. Somebody has really watched carefully. Um, Add some blocks on the side that's short, or remove some blocks on the right, or dismantle the right side. I really like it. Typically, if we do this as an example with a lot of people, the initial answers, just like how Artem and everybody else said, Adil said, you would be adding 3 blocks to make it stable. And typically, that's the most number of answers. So there's a person called Lady Klotz who wrote this book called Subtract, which is about the untapped science of less. Tried this with his child, and then he took this experiment and tried this with a lot of others. Natalia, yes, if you don't have enough blocks, you can remove from the right side. Absolutely. And when he did this research, he found that most people add while it's easier to subtract. Adding means you need more resources. I need 3 more blocks that I have to get from somewhere. But whereas removing and adding would just mean that I remove blocks and I work with my own resources. But it was found that people normally suggested add more blocks. And he called this subtraction neglect in his book. So let's say that somebody made a bowl of soup for you and they present it to you and you taste it and they ask you, how can you improve the soup? What would your answer be? And I think you're getting the gist, but I just want to hear from what would your answer be? You've tasted the soup, you've been told, how can I improve the soup? What would that answer be? Add something. Artem, you'll have to translate for me. I don't know how. Add salt and pepper, Anna says. The person before Anna, I'm call your wife in my case. Tim, I'm sure you can do a soup. Sorry, I'm not a cook. Okay. Tim, I'm not able to read the ones in Russian, so you'll have to help me with it. If you can just retype those for me, if you don't mind. I'm not able to see translation. Add spices. Okay. Yeah, typically, again, when remove something, I love the fact that it's perfect. I like that as well. Lot of the times, again, we will look at adding something to it. Maybe actually what is needed to improve it is removing some ingredients. And this is going to form the basis for our today's conversation. As you know, the title is Less is More, and using stories to shed light on overcoming organizational angst. Now, when I say angst, it means that the organization is really suffering. When we say angst, so it is take a shot to make it tasty. I love the cheeky answers as well. Thank you. So I mentioned this in the abstract, but I want to just share it again to set the context for everybody's benefit. If Maslow's hierarchy was redone, we would put time today on top of that hierarchy because we are all time deficient. Our email inboxes are stuffed. We are really trying to find a way to cut through the noise. But still, we find it very difficult to say no. And this is not a gender thing, but in general, we just find it difficult to say no. So sometimes this is called subtraction neglect. That is, we find it difficult to say no, remove blocks, remove ingredients. And this carries forward in organizations as well. We all have an addition bias. We add processes, we add tasks, then processes go out of date and become useless, but they still remain. And sometimes, just like in the Lego block, instead of just adding or subtracting, we might have to discard the whole thing and build it all over again. That could be an answer, build it up fresh. And I think somebody said, try something different as well. In fact, in organizations, we end up incentivizing additions. So if you launch a new initiative, you get a promotion. If you implement a new technology, you get a pay raise. You expand the product portfolio, you are left with so many verticals to handle. And of course, we also end up double hatting roles. This causes really siloed activity, misunderstanding, rework, and duplication. And these are obstacles to creativity and productivity in the organization. It damages not just organizational health, but our health as well. And this comes in the way of meaningful conversation. So I want to leave you with that reflection about what leaders can do to shed light and build change using stories. So I want to talk about three kinds of light today. The first one is a flashlight or a torchlight, and each country calls it differently, but it's a flashlight or a torchlight. So, how can you, as a leader, shine a light on organizational practices and do a habits audit? The case happened it was during the research by professors of Stanford University called Robert Sutton and Huggy Rao. They worked on how leaders are actually trustees of people's time, how they can prevent and remove organizational obstacles that really damage the health, kill creativity, productivity, and all that. So they recommended what might be required, which they called good riddance reviews. So let me share an example of one such review. When Dr. Melinda Ashton was the Chief Quality Officer at Hawaii Public Health, it's the largest non-profit healthcare center in Hawaii, she was troubled that the clinical staffers were devoting too much time updating patient records and too little time examining, treating, and comforting patients, which is what the nursing staff are supposed to do. Now, have you seen this happen in your organizations where the focus is on documentation and less on the clients and customers? Again, say yes or no as on the chat. You might have seen this. I've seen this happen a lot with banks where you're so keen on sitting in front of the terminal and writing your documentation and updating things that you're not making eye contact with the client, you're not talking to them. So they launched a program, Dr. Ashton launched a program called Get Rid of Stupid Stuff program in 2017. And that, I've seen a lot of it. And we are seeing this everywhere. So she called it Gross or Get Rid of Stupid Stuff program. And one of the first steps that was done was to ask nursing assistants, nurses, and doctors to find or nominate anything in the system that were poorly designed, unnecessary, or plain stupid. Now, can you take a guess on how many processes that they found which were unnecessary? 50, 100, 200. Can you take a guess on what would have been the number of processes that they found unnecessary? Vinod says 200, 120, 200 Adil. We know that the worst is going to happen, right? 200. Anna says 50. There were about 188 subtraction targets that they arrived at after doing this research. And out of that 188, they came up with 87 improvements. And subtracting all that stupid stuff freed up a lot of time. For instance, in one case, they removed just one mouse click for every nurse and nursing assistant that was required to do for every patient during the hourly rounds. That saved 24 seconds per click, which all total across 4 hospitals covered 1,700 nursing hours of time per month. That is, they saved 2 months of time in 1 month for all the 4 hospitals, for all the nursing staff, for every patient. So venture capitalist Michael Deering beautifully says this by urging leaders to be the editor-in-chief in the organization. So instead of adding addition targets, can you give your leaders and your team subtraction targets? What are you going to say no to? And what's in your stop doing list? So I want you to reflect on this and think about what you can do in your organizations. And of course, please feel free to put it on the chat so we can all learn together. So what are you going to say no to? What are the kind of subtraction targets? Absolutely. And Natalia, she did encounter resistance initially. Absolutely, you're right, when they decided to change the process. But it was a reduction process. It's like, oh, you don't need to click one extra. So it was sort of like an incentive that they would save time. So I think that was the driver in working. It was not an additive process, it was a reductive process. Thanks for asking that, Natalia. I mean, absolutely. Change resistance is such a big thing, right? So it's totally connects. So I want you to ask your clients, customers, to identify unnecessary obstacles which are clogging time. And I want you to be the leaders who are really changing that and driving that. Adele says, seems countercultural norms wise. We are trained for more, more, more. And that's why. That's why it's a new muscle that we need to build. Um, so I'm going to carry on now. So we talked about the first one, which was the torchlight, which is really doing habits audit. So we talked about that, but this was specifically in my mind when I read about this incident in Stanford University. A senior administrator wrote a 1,266 word email with a 7,266 word attachment to 20,000 faculty members, inviting all of them to devote a Saturday brainstorming a new sustainability tool. So the email word count was 1,266. The attachment word count was 7,266. Now, while this may not happen, hopefully, in every organization, zeroing in on that one category of challenge can yield big results. So, my second light that I'm going to talk about is a focus light. A lot of you might have seen this. You use it when you're going for hiking. It focuses the light on one particular thing, on a narrow, small area to shed the light. So the second light I want to talk about is about starting small. How can you, and let me give you an example for it. There was a project called Friction Project, which the same two professors, Robert Sutton and Hagi Rao, did. It was about how smart leaders make the right decisions. How do they use, do the right things to make things easier and the wrong things harder. So they focus their attention on people who are taking responsibility for identifying, removing, and repairing what they called was jargon monoxide. And I'm just going to type that word so that we let that word sink in. Those hollow, long-winded, convoluted, incomprehensive language that undermines workplace communication. It undermines collaboration and coordination. As a business storyteller, and I'm sure there are lots of you like that in the audience today, this is particularly appealing to me. That is a way to cut through the jargon and move people to understanding the messaging, remembering the messaging, and being able to retell and share the message. And that's what we say stories do, right? It helps you understand complicated concepts. You're able to remember it because it's so visual. And then you're able to retell it because it's very easy to remember. So you are able to pass on the message really clearly. So in this case, the authors talked to a team of 7 workers from New Zealand's Nelson Hospital who replaced medical jargon with plain language in the letters that physicians wrote to the patients. So there was an article run in an internal medicine journal, and the way it worked is the team ran an experiment with 60 patients who were suffering from chronic health conditions. All the 60 received the usual jargon-filled letter from a doctor that described the condition and that suggested some course of treatment. But the team then randomly picked 30 patients and got a translated letter 2 weeks later with the common terms replacing the medical technical terminology. And let me give a few examples. For instance, peripheral edema was translated to ankle swelling. Tachycardia was translated to fast heart rate. Idiopathic which a lot of doctors do right when they don't know what is going on, was translated to unknown cause. The fact that this letter was sent with this translation means the patients appreciated the clarity. 78% of the patients preferred the translated letter. 69% said that it had a positive impact on the relationship with the physician. And more importantly, what is the purpose of a physician telling you a diagnosis, writing that letter, and suggesting a course of treatment? It's for you to get better. So 80% convinced and were agreed to increase their ability to manage their own health. They didn't get scared of those big words. They understood what it was. So they took charge of their treatment, and they said they were working on getting better because they understood what they needed to do and what the issue was. The patients were also asked to circle any items or any terms in the letter that they didn't understand in that original letter. So patients who had that untranslated letters, can you guess in a range of 1 to 10 how many letters they circled? The jargon fill letter? About 9, Natalia. We really believe in doomsday today. Really a lot of any other numbers? Anybody else in the range of 1 to 10? 120. I like that. 6. Yeah. So it was about 8 terms they circled that they didn't understand in the original letter. And in the translated letter, some of them still had difficulty because it was difficult to accept and manage a condition. So but they circled 2 words instead of the 8 words. So the team's efforts to banish jargon monoxide eliminated unnecessary friction between the patients and the physicians. And I see this when I work with, it can make you feel stupid, right? Why don't I understand that? I'm totally with you. I missed some of the previous chat, but I'll come back to it at the end, and acknowledge it for sure. Thank you so much for keeping the comments going, because it shows that while we are all not on video together, it shows that we are relating and connecting. So thank you for that. So when I work with technical folks, when I work with research scientists and help them communicate their PhD thesis better, this is something that we work on. How can you communicate your scientific knowledge in a way that, say, your investors who are not from your field can understand? Say anybody can relate to the why of your project. Why does it have to be technical and why does it have to be complicated when the audience is not necessarily technical? Audience is wide range. They come from different disciplines. So this is something that also is called Trojan mice. That's a term that's used to describe. Basically, these are very small, well-focused changes introduced in a very inconspicuous way. So obviously, the hospital wouldn't have done a marketing campaign or a PR campaign or a press release to say that we are doing this change translation letter. You do it subtly, you do it in an inconspicuous way, but they are small enough to be understood and owned by everybody concerned. And these are called Trojan mice, unleashing the Trojan mice. So don't do, does she, Mary Alice? Okay. So don't do things which are big things, which require a lot of spend. And there was some conversation earlier about change resistance. That's where the change resistance comes. Huge budgets, ask, and all that. Start small things, set small, nimble things running around and see where they head. So that's the second spotlight that we are talking about using the small spotlight to focus on those small things. So we talked about the torchlight, which is on, focusing on things. We talked about the spotlight. So how can we prepare and equip individuals to successfully adopt change so that organizational outcomes can be driven? And these are 2 examples, which leads me to the third light, which is, I don't have a lighthouse in front of me, but Artem has created this whole thing around lighthouse. So we have the guiding lighthouses. How can leaders be the role models who are the guiding lighthouses? So the third metaphor that I want to use is a lighthouse. And I read about this incident in a company called Wipro in India. Wipro is a Indian multinational company which is involved in information technology, IT services. It also looks at business processes. Some of you might have heard of that company. I can just type the name on the chat. So when Wipro initiated Six Sigma, the company chose Motorola to train their senior management on the know-how. One of the guiding principles for Six Sigma is to embrace quality in a very personal way. You have to really take it in and believe in it. And Asim Premji, who was leading Wipro at that time, said, I'm going to own this project and I'm going to ensure that it really works. And what he did was he picked up one item, which is meetings as his product or service. And the participants in the meeting are his customers. So at the end of every meeting that he did, Premji would give out feedback forms that rated the quality of the meeting on various parameters. And the forms had to be returned to what he called mission quality, where they were analyzed and they went back to Premji on the defect levels of the meeting, a root cause analysis, so that his meetings could be measured, analyzed, controlled, and improved, just like how they do it in TQM or total quality management. So this exercise really, it elicited a lot of curiosity, some laughs as well, saying, oh my God, what are you wasting time on meetings like this? But he stuck to it. He said, I'm going to be doing this. And soon the entire organization got the message that at Wipro, quality was taken extremely seriously and can never be compromised in any area of work. So the whole point of it was every change requires personal commitment from the leader. So leader can be that lighthouse who's guiding the teams, guiding the people out of the darkness by committing to do that action, removing that obstacle. So leaders can be really clever friction fixers. Avoiding unnecessary friction helps a lot easier. I bet that works in the medical area too. And you're absolutely right, Ingas. Thanks for sharing that. And Adil, your comment about academia, huge words. But I think we all went through that phase as well. When I was a small kid and I would learn a new word, I would immediately use it in a sentence. It was a way of remembering the word, but I thought big words means great. Big words means you are intelligent. And I think that's some of the conditioning that also happens. Of course, as we grow older, we are now working towards how do we simplify the complex. That's the space that we all are in today, and that's the connecting factor. So leaders can be that friction fixers. What do we need to remove from the processes? What do we need to really identify and create such mechanisms? It could be rules, review processes, it could be financial penalties that makes it harder to add unnecessary stuff. So we talked earlier about, how can leaders really give subtraction targets to the teams? And this is why we need all these three stories: the story of building habits and doing a habit audit, the story of starting small, letting those Trojan mice float around, and the story of being that guiding lighthouse who's taking the organization and guiding it to shed light and remove all the angst. And that's why we need these three lights. So, and leaders can create this awareness by learning to say no, but also a lot of the times it is important that we say no so that we can say yes to something more important. And storytelling is part of the process which helps us internalize this. Through stories, we can create change that brings an intellectual and emotional connection with information. And this emotional connection is really important for that change to happen, because change is an emotional experience which is based on logic. So with that, I just want to leave you with one winding thought, which is, what are you saying no to so you can say yes to something more important? This could be on prioritizing work and life. This could be on, let's go back to the soup example. Maybe you need to reduce salt, but maybe you need to add carrots instead or something like that. So, really looking at that balance and looking at your work life integration, work life balance, looking at mental health, and how you as leader are shedding these lights on all habits. It could be around processes, it could be around how we are treating diversity, it could be around culture change, it could be around any other change in strategy that you're driving. How can you as leader be the one who's shedding the light? So really thank you for this opportunity. I want to take a pause now and request Artem for, I'm going to quickly look through the chat as well for anything, and I'm open to any questions as well.
Thank you so much. This was very enlightening, and let me share the lighthouse with you. So, Inga is asking us, could you please repeat 3 points with the light, and how do you do it?
Sure. Thank you. So the first one, the metaphor I used was a torchlight or a flashlight. So how we are looking at habits and processes which are there in the organization and doing a habit audit. So habit audit is what we are looking at in the first slide. And I'm going to type it on the chat as well. The second light is more of a focus light or a spotlight, which goes into these small things and small changes that are could happen in organizations where the impact could be big. And we talked about how just changing the jargony words in the letter can have a big impact. And the third point that we talked about was about leaders being the lighthouses. So leaders as role models to drive change, to enable all this happening. So habits audit, starting small, and leaders as role models. So those are your flashlights or torchlight, your spotlight, and your lighthouses.
Love it.
Is that,
dear
is
friends,
that good?
if you have any more questions for Soundari, please write them into the chat. I will translate them for you. While we're waiting, I have a question of my own. All those lights are internal in nature. Is there any way an organization can be enlightened from outside so they can then transmit a light with torchlights, etc., inside?
Yeah. No, beautiful question. And I think that's what we all are doing through sharing our experiences. We are bringing something from outside. Today, the examples that I shared, which is about Dr. Melanie Ashton, about Nelson Hospital, about Wipro, are all external examples. These are not our organizations. But bringing that light and stories, we say, are migrants, right? They travel really well. So taking those stories and using the power of those stories to shed light within our organization. For instance, if we say that, oh my God, we are getting very technical in this discussion, we are getting too much into jargon monoxide. I mean, of course, that sounds like a nice word to say, but what does that mean? And how do you explain how that process can be internalized into any organization? Sharing that example, say from Nelson Hospital, would be a good segue for you to bring the conversation inside from outside and shed light on what we could be reviewing internally to us. Yeah. Does that make sense, Artem?
Yeah, it does. I love the migration part of stories, and I guess that's probably an answer to Adel's question. She's not. She says she's not a decision maker, and her leadership is leaning towards conventional more is more, and asking how might I persuade them that less is more. So apart from the ideas you've shared beautifully, anything you'd like to add to Adel?
Yeah, Adel, thank you so much. Great question. And this is a big struggle, right? If the leadership doesn't believe, then we are left as, say, we could be in the near senior management, we could be in the middle management and all that. I think it is, we can only be the change that we want to see. So sometimes just within our teams, if we are discussing it, if we can then take it and provide the data around it. Say, for instance, in the jargon example, the fact that you created 80% more willingness from the patients to adopt things could be a good vertical to go and share. You could also do we do these test pilots and small things, right? So we do these small things within our team and then showcase the result to the organization. Leaders want to know data. Stories are data with a soul. So if you can combine both of those, I think over a period of time, the change is becoming visible for them and they see the benefits.
Couldn't agree more. That's lovely. And I love the comment by Inga. So the source of light was a complex metaphor. I only now get that. What a beautiful and well-structured vector, and universal too. That's what Soundari is bringing to the conference year after year. Thank you so much. That was lovely.
Thank you for that generous comment, Inga. And Adil, so experiment within the circle like an influence and let the letters be. Absolutely, Adil. I think, sometimes we worry, even in the world around, we worry about what's happening elsewhere, what I can't control. We can control what we can. So the change starts small, but it can have a big impact. Thank you. Thank you for that question.
That is so true. I love how you are saying this thing that a story shows us perspective and gives us an idea of what is to come. And I guess it works both ways. I mean, if somebody shares a story of someone who believed more is more and what it ended up in, that might probably be an anti-lighthouse of like where not to go, in a way of being an example. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your website. I forgot to include that. Thank you.
No worries. No, Tim, you're running a great job with the conference. I'm so happy to be here and such engaging audience. Thank you all so much. I will scroll back on the chat after the session and have a look at it. So if I've missed anything, you know where to find me.
Thank you so much. Soundari, before I let you go, I have a tradition. Yes. Every year, I ask every speaker the same question connected to the conference theme. So you're the first one this year. And the question goes like this. A lighthouse can show us where the danger is, but a group of lighthouses can guide us through dangerous waters. What story would you like to see more people tell? Because we need more people sharing their stories about this to navigate our now.
Yeah. I think we got a lot of answers in the chat and in this conversation itself, Tim. So I really don't have too much to add to that. I think we need to talk about stories of connections. I think in the previous session, I caught just a little bit of it towards the end, where the lady talks about the landlord who didn't want to, engage with them, who didn't want to know where are you coming from and all that. We need a lot of those connection stories. So I'm an Indian living in Hong Kong for 18 years. My neighbors are from Hong Kong. They're Hong Kong Chinese, but we've built a connection. I mean, they shared flowers to me on Mother's Day. What can be more beautiful than that? And we need to share more of those stories. And stories as migrants, I think, is the most powerful thing about story. So it helps today, whatever I shared in terms of the examples is really going to be something that you can take. You might forget some of the names. I think in the first retelling, what was the name of that doctor? What is the name of the hospital? But you'll remember the idea to say that, yes, I really felt that pain. And in the chat, I could see that lighting up. So we need to share more stories of connections that are built, which influence business action. Because at the end of the day, we are driving business outcomes. And I think these stories drive those outcomes through building those connections. So I think we definitely need more connection stories for sure.
Love it. Thank you so much. Great answer. And resonates with me a lot. We've been discussing this with my wife lately. She's been sharing that in narrative therapy, story is only one of the metaphors that is used to see, to look at the situation and help the client. And the other metaphor is connections. So I love how you connected these two in one answer. Thank you so much, Soundari. It's always such a pleasure to have you here. Please stay, and as long as your schedule admits. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And what a wonderful group of people you've managed to put together and inspire to be here on this conference. I'm really grateful to you. And this is something which is yearly on my calendar. So my May next year, 2025, is already blocked. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to enjoying the conference with everyone.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, let's give Soundari some fire in our chat and in our right corner as gratitude, and we will be moving now to our next.